Welcome to the White Lotus channel. Thanks for being here. Deck review. Temur Rhinos by Appa. I think I'm pronouncing that right. So what do we have? It is a ramp deck, similar on top end to Panza, without Panza, but not using Avenging Hunter, using Crash of the Rhino Beetles. Let's take a look at the curve real quick. Turn one, not much. We're not really brainstorming or spreading on one. Best move is search for tomorrow on suspend. The first couple of turns, all you're really trying to do, you want to get to 5 mana as fast as possible. Best play, best sequence, turn one, search for tomorrow. Turn two, Steve or Nature's Lore. Trying to get to 5 mana as fast as you can. Rhinos on 4 or 5, wherever you get it. But the trick here is you want to set up the cascade, right? Like that's the goal of the deck. So you want to get to a turn, later turns, where you can go brainstorm, set up Altasaur into boarding party, into Rhinos. Now, when I look at the deck on paper before playing it, my concern is there's not as much disruption and control elements in the deck. You've got 4 Scred, and you've got 1 Fang Dragon, where if you use, what is that, Fork Tail Sweep, it's 1 damage to the board. That's it. So your goal is to stay alive, ramp out, cascade, drop in big creatures on the board. You do have Boulder Branch Golem to get some life, some more off Generous Ent, off the token. If you can get to that, stay alive, see what happens. It's fun to play. The format right now, in my opinion, I would agree with Cali K's on his assessment, where the goal currently is stick a threat and see if you can deal with it. If that's true, I think it is, but subjective. This is how we analyze it. If true, you only have 4 Screds and a Fang Dragon to deal with said threat. So the deck plays fairly. It ramps out. Very good in linear type strategies when your opponent's doing that. This is not doing well against combo. Obviously, you have no way to disrupt it. But in a fair matchup, the deck's got some game. So we'll get into the sideboard real quick, and then we'll get into some games. Breath Weapon for go wide decks. The Glamour, obviously, with all that glitters, Bogles, Mono White, Heroic, things like that. Some gain life versus red. An extra Boulder Branch for more life. Reverent Silence, pretty cool card. You don't see it very much, but it's great. Any type of Bogles deck, Mono White Heroic, things like that. Glitters Affinity does well in that regard. So not going to spend a whole lot of time on the deck. Usually the channel is based on decks that have done something competitively somewhere. But the meta is what it is. I keep saying that. It's really matchup dependent. So most of the frustration is if you're looking for a deck that's just tops against everything, that's kind of hard to do. You can look at the metagame stats, and it's kind of rock, paper, scissory. So, Terra is going to be great against certain things. Red will be good against certain things. Fairies does its thing. Familiars, Panza. Everybody's got what they're good against and what they're not good against. And there's a lot of decks that are in that area. So your success often is coming down to matchups, right? Which that frustrates some people. But guess what? Stop bitching. It just is what it is. That's what the format is. You don't have control over it. There are a ton of decks that exist out there that on any given day with the right matchups is going to do really, really well. Some a little better than others. But, we saw Mono White Heroic get first, 8th in a week. And we've seen Elves and a whole bunch of other stuff. So depending on your meta, this deck might be for you, especially if you're playing in paper, local game store, something like that. You know your meta. I don't. This deck, again, is to ramp out, utilizing ramp the first couple of turns, trying to stick its bigger threats, and then using Brainstorm to cascade, whether it's boarding party into Crash of Rhinos or avenging into boarding party into Crash of Rhinos. It's also not bad to boarding party into Lorien Revealed. Just saying. But let's check out some games. Match 1, game 1. We'll go with that. Got some ramp. It's not great, right? We got a little bit too many lands in the hand, but we've got Search for Tomorrow in 1. Hopefully don't have to use Scred that early. Altasaur is very late. We want the hand to develop, but we'll play with it and see what we got. Suspend it. Mountain Swift to go. So what are we doing here, right? What are we thinking? Survive. That's what the hell we're thinking. Because we don't know what burn version they're on. Are they on Kadotha? They on Bushwhacker? They on Pinger? Don't know. But those red decks play out different. But the goal is typically to kill you pretty quick, right? So we're just going to try to stay alive and develop. Now, what I'm thinking here already, Boulder Branch Golem's probably not being cast for 7. We're going to have to stay alive and cast it for 4. Use that Gingerbread Cabin in the hand to gain some life as well. But that's coming later. We really don't want Swifty to get out of hand. Steve is good. We'll take that. Deal with Swifty now before they can try to, get it past 4 toughness. We have 4 snow lands. So, and don't make this fucking mistake. Don't count your Gingerbread Cabin as a snow land. I've done it, right? So you're counting how many lands I got in play. It does X damage and you're 1 short. We all know that, but it's easy to do. Block and sack. Again, the goal is to get as many lands into play as possible. I think a lot. Rhinos really aren't 15-15 that often. The game is going pretty long if that happens. But if you could pull it off, that's great. We're going to play it now. See if we can force them to use, multiple burn spells to get through it. We could have played Boulder Branch Golem, but the reason that we were thinking, or I was thinking, we're playing Boulder Branch early, but we're only down 3 life on turn 4 against red. And we've got 2, 4, 6. Maybe we do get to cast it. If we hit a non-tap land, we can play it and gain 6, which is better than 3. If we don't hit it, we're just going to prototype it. Opponent only has 1 card in hand. I'll go with that. Again, we can go ahead and play Boulder Branch Golem. Gain 3 and then gain 3 off the token if necessary. We'll probably leverage the stack, so if they're going crazy and throw a burn, we'll gain life in response to that. Opponent concedes. Wish it was a better game. He quit the match too. That's okay. That's his choice. But the interesting thing is, turn 5, we're only at 13, far away from being dead. Gaining 3 puts us to 16. He may not have an attack, and if that's the case, we brainstorm and set things up. Let's go on to the next game. Match 2. Opponent is the famous Burt of Paradise. Probably on food control. Not a bad opener. Let's run it and see if he's playing what he's been playing. Maybe he's got some updates from the new set that didn't help many people, except for maybe him. If he's playing, yeah, he's on food control. So what we know from this point, right, playing food or against food, this is not a fast deck. Like, we're not under massive amounts of pressure. He's obviously he's going to want to get Fangren Marauder in play, do a slow drip with the cat and the food, makeshift munitions. But we know we're not under tremendous pressure, so we can take our time and develop. But I'd get some popcorn and expect a long game when you're playing against food. We're just going to hard cast. Search for Tomorrow. No reason to suspend it. suspend turn 1, but we can go ahead and do it now for the hard cast. We would think, potentially boarding party. Next turn, maybe generous ent, depends. Probably party because it's going to maximize value. Cascade to brainstorm, it's not the best. Sometimes it works out. And with this cat gets a lot of work in all the time. It can be a little annoying, but that's the game. That's the game plan. You know what you're up against. You have to develop a strategy to get there. But we know that we want to get as many creatures on the board as possible to put as many threats in play as possible, or this cat is just going to block all day long. That can't block trample. The trample damage get through. But if we're just swinging with one creature over and over again, he's also got plenty of time. He's not under pressure either. This deck, the Rhino's deck, does not put early game pressure on, but it can create a board state that's extremely difficult to deal with. We're on turn 5 already with no pressure against us. We may get 10 lands in play and have a 15-15 Rhino. Doesn't happen very often, but the game is what it is, and you have to make those decisions as the game plays out. You start making assumptions on the game itself, then you're not going to play optimally. I almost cast Lorien Revealed here. I'd like to cast it. Draw some more cards. We're keeping Scred open because when you play against food control, Fangren Marauder is huge for them, and we just going to deal with it. I don't know when it's coming or if it will come, but we're going to try to keep that red open all the time. But this cat, man, this fucking cat, it just gets the work in against certain decks. And I cuss a lot too, so if you don't like it, just fast forward. Is what it is. Hide the women and children. He's over there doing his thing, getting all his food in, doing the same thing we are. It's working towards the end game. I like our end game. If you get a 15-15 Rhino, or a couple of them, they only run, I'm not sure what modifications he's done currently, but it's a couple cast downs, some snuff outs. I think I'd have to check the list again. They might run Chainer's Edict, not sure. But yeah, we're under no pressure. Just let it develop. Try to get the Rhinos in play, because we got to get through that cat. Trample's a good way to do that. If they get Quirion Ranger and they start bouncing the the gingerbread around, that can be pretty annoying too. But 2 cards in the opponent's hand, we're going to get some more. Really like to hit Altasaur or Boarding Party here, but just getting that value. It's interesting on the stock mana cost, right? If you go from, think this through, right? You go Altasaur into Boarding Party into Crash of the Rhino Beetles. You pay 7 mana, and then you have another 11, right? 7 mana, and you get 7 plus 6 plus 5. 18 mana worth of value out of 7. It's pretty crazy. Broken? Hey, I don't make the rules. You just play what you play. Be a little patient here. I want as many threats in play as possible. So we draw the cards off Lorien. Play a Steve. You could play Rhinos there for sure if you want to. But I'm trying to make... We're at 31 cards in the library. He's at 34, so we've outdrawn them. But we want to put pressure on, but we also want to get as many into play as possible. And right now, Golem plus Steve. That's a land out the deck. Maybe he gets nervous and uses a removal spell on something else and not on the Rhino, which is cool. If that happens. Still keeping Scred open. And 2 mana to gain 3 life. I really don't want to Scred the Ent, but he's only got 1 card in hand. So we'll get rid of it. I really want the Cascade creatures, but we got what we got. On those low pressure decks like Jund Food, you can take your time. It's a great matchup because they're slow, you're a little slower. And I mean, things could have gone faster with more Cascade creatures for sure. But we're just taking the time to develop, get as many threats in play as possible. As you can see, Crash of the Rhino Beetles at 15-15, and it would be awfully nice if it lived. I thought Marauder was coming for sure, which I don't want to see. Like, I absolutely don't want to see Marauder at all. It's just dragging the game on. Draw some cards off Lorien. Boarding Party. Lorien again. Draw more cards. And we're just, right now, it's like, well, we've got a lot of damage. You got 15 trample off Rhinos. That's a lot of damage coming. So, you know, if you got Marauder, you got Marauder. But we're just going to swing now. Just put a lot of damage. The Rhinos get their work in if you can't deal with it. 15. It's nice. Cuts the life total in half. And another one in hand. And him at 1 card, so we're in a pretty good spot. It's going to suck if he casts down or something like that on the Rhino, because that's going to get your damage in. Sure. Get that thing, get the Ent out of here. He can still buy some time. Turn 13. I mean, it's just a lot of different stuff can go on. Gain a ton of life. But 1 card in hand for him, which is good. And we can play the second Beetle. Play the Ent if necessary. Probably be the Beetle. It's a long game, which is to our advantage. All right, so you have 30 trample damage from the Rhinos. I don't know how you get out of that, but we'll see. He's digging, but I don't think it matters. So you can gain 3 off Lembas. Yeah, he scooped. On to game 2 versus Food. Game 2 versus Bird of Paradise. We're behind on time, which is interesting because they're slow. Opening hand for us is slow, but we've got Steve on turn 2. Lorien to fetch an island. Generous to fetch other things as well. It's not a great opener, but we've got some ramp and some lands. And he mulliganed heavily, so we're going to keep it. He's got 3 cards in hand at the moment. So things should look pretty good for us. Opponent misses land drop. Get in 1 point of damage, sack it. Again, get lands in play is the priority. I'm not going to beat down with Steve all day long. Just get in for 1 while we're at it. Go for it. Get the tap lands out of the way. Draw some cards. We could have kept Steve there. Try to ramp out some more. But we ditched that. Don't really want to ditch a land when the goal of the deck is to get as many lands in play as possible. Two damage from the opponent. It's no concern. We're trying to set up Altasaur here. So we should set up Altasaur into Boarding Party into Unknown. So we got Altasaur into Boarding Party into Cascade, Lori, and Reveal. Draw 3. That's pretty good. It's a lot of pressure on the opponent. Triple Scred. Yeah, I think it runs 3 Fangren Marauder. So we'll deal with all of it. Set up Boarding Party into Crash of the Rhino Beetles. Swinging for 12. Won't be long till we're at 10 lands. It's a lot of pressure on the opponent. But the game's still going long, right? It's like turn 8. Nope. So we get Crash of the Rhino Beetles. Nature's Lore gets the 10th land. 15/15 Rhino. We should be good. But, it wasn't the best when you mulligan like that for your opponent. It's tough to recover from, especially with 15 trample. Game 1 is more indicative of what those decks do. So Appa, he created something pretty decent. I've seen a few takes on Crash of the Rhino Beetles. Is it better than Avenging Hunter? I don't know. Maybe in some, it's not as strictly better, right? We gotta avoid that. But it's certainly got a home. It's fun to play with. I think the shell is there. My big concern is it lacks the disruption, but it's kind of necessary in the event that you're trying to ramp. So if you could always go a Panzer route or a Jund route, but you would always be asking yourself, is the Rhino better than Avenging Hunter? So in this particular deck design, this deck is designed very well for what it's trying to do. Get a whole lot of lands in play, 15/15 Rhinos, get some decent matchups, and your creatures are simply just bigger. And ultimately, brainstorm, set up the cascade, and gain your value. The stock mana is really amazing. To hit 18 mana off 7 as a possibility, it's pretty sweet. Anyway, thanks to Appa for the deck. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Be well.